Chancellor, it is my privilege to present to you, for conferral of the honorary degree of Doctor of Economics, Professor Dr. Budiono.
On behalf of this university, I confer the honorary degree of Doctor of Economics upon Budiono.
It is now my pleasure to invite Professor Dr. Budiono to respond to the Chancellor. Thank you.
Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, Honorable Ministers, members of the Senate, deans of the faculties, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to thank, first of all, the Chancellor and the Vice-Chancellor for their generous introduction and their kind words. I feel extremely proud and at the same time very much humbled to stand before you today to receive the great honor bestowed upon me by my alma mater, the University of Western Australia. It is the more so as it happens to coincide with the centenary of this great university. Returning to this campus after so many years rekindles old memories. I first came to Perth around this time of the year in 1963, 48 years ago, together with another Indonesian student, Abdillah Toha, joining 6 other Indonesian students. Abdillah, my ex-roommate and now longtime friend, is here with us today. We were under the Australian government's Colombo Plan scholarships, a program that, in my view, has had enduring benefits for the relations between Australia and Indonesia. Let me say that my 4-year stay at this great institution as an undergraduate has had a profound mark on my thinking. For some time after my arrival at this university, I felt like somebody coming from a totally different world, unprepared for the task ahead. I understand they call it now a cultural shock. But when you were young, when you were at the impressionable age, you would somehow manage to adjust yourself to what were around you and even absorb them. Unfortunately, I found everyone, the lecturers, fellow students, student counselor, and I must also mention my first-time landlady, to be completely helpful. So the adjustments went reasonably well. And looking back, I believe I've got most out of my UWA years. If someone asks me what was the greatest influence that this institution has had on me personally, I would say that it was its contribution to the formation of my attitude toward people and towards society. Yes, the basic building block of my subsequent view of the world. I had my first serious exposure to economics, the toolkits of my subsequent real-life works, here at this university, guided by outstanding teachers. But looking back, it was the indirect benefits that have profoundly influenced my journey in life. Almost every aspect of university life here was then new to me. But what impressed me most was the ambience of intellectual integrity and honesty prevalent in each lecture class, each tutorial class, and each discussion group that I attended, a hallmark of a first-rate learning institution. With my UWA experience and credentials, new doors of opportunity suddenly opened up for me. With a short interlude in the private sector, I moved on to do further academic works in a number of universities. However, circumstances have subsequently drawn me into government jobs ever since. It has now been over 4 decades since I left the University of Western Australia. But there is no doubt in my mind that it was in this university that my intellectual foundation was laid. Ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you that during most of the period of my study at this university, the political relation between Australia and Indonesia was not cordial at all. And in fact, it grew increasingly tense as time passed. It was the time of Indonesia's confrontation with Malaysia, and Australia was openly on the side of Malaysia. Yet, to my recollection, there was no single incident in which we, the Indonesian students in Perth, were treated unkindly by anybody. Later on, during my further years of stay in other parts of Australia, I came to realize that such attitude was a manifestation of a broader value that many Australians cherish, namely that of fairness and fair play. As you would say it in Strine, it is all and always fair dinkum. I must also mention here that even during the height of the confrontation, our personal relation with Malaysian students was always good, even when at times we had heated debates on politics. Ladies and gentlemen, so much for the trip down memory lane. Allow me now to look forward. I will use the next few minutes to share with you my thoughts on the relations between our two nations. It is not an exaggeration to say that no two close neighbors are as different from each other as Australia and Indonesia, historically, culturally, and politically. It is therefore not too surprising that our bilateral relations have been marked by ups and downs, caused, among others, by ideological differences, different strategic orientation, mutual misunderstandings and misperceptions, as well as a host of other bilateral irritants. Yet, in recent years, relations between Jakarta and Canberra have become ever closer, helped in part by Indonesia's democratization, which has narrowed the political gap between our two countries. At the same time, the convergence of our common interests in a growing number of transnational, regional, and global issues have made cooperation between our two countries both necessary and inevitable. Let me cite some of them. Indonesia and Australia share common concerns about the threat posed by terrorism. The first Bali bombing in 2002 killed over 200 innocent victims, the majority of whom were Australians. The problems of people smuggling and drug trafficking are also major issues in our bilateral relations, which call for closer cooperation and coordination of policies. In 2005, the leaders of Indonesia and Australia signed the Joint Declaration on Comprehensive Partnership that elevated the bilateral relation between Indonesia and Australia to a new level. Currently, Indonesia-Australia relations are at their best ever. Bilateral cooperation covers almost all fields of interest. In 2006, Indonesia and Australia signed a framework agreement on security cooperation, better known as the Lombok Treaty. It should be noted that Indonesia has not signed such a treaty with any other country. There are many forums and processes in which representatives of our two governments meet regularly to tackle common problems. The economic relations between Indonesia and Australia have continued to grow, albeit not as fast as we would have liked. Indonesia now only ranks 12th among Australia's trading partners. With the talks currently ongoing to finalize Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, we hope to see acceleration of trade and investment between our two countries. Ladies and gentlemen, Australia has been a generous friend to Indonesia. At a time of adversity, such as when Indonesia was hit by a giant tsunami in late 2004, Australia was one of the first countries that came to Indonesia's assistance. Australia's aid programs to Indonesia throughout the years have been significant. People-to-people relations have also grown steadily over the years. Over the past 50 years, more than 11,000 Indonesian students have obtained scholarship to study in Australia. Currently, around 18,000 Indonesian students are studying here in Australia, the 8th largest pool of international students in this country. Notwithstanding the close relations between our two countries, we can see that there is still much room for improvement. The volatility in our bilateral relations over the decades remains a concern. At certain periods, it was rather like a roller coaster with its slow rise and rapid fall, sometimes over quite trivial issues. Clearly, we need to develop more ballast in our bilateral relations that can cushion the occasional shocks that may come unexpectedly from various sources. After all, the differences between our two societies remain great, and we should accept it as a fact. I'm aware that, as a recent survey revealed, many in Australia still look at Indonesia with varying degrees of suspicion, mostly due to historical legacy, but partly also because of a general lack of information about Indonesia. I have the sense that at least the lay public here may not have been too well informed of the fundamental transformation that have taken place in Indonesia, which has made Indonesia into the world's third largest democracy, where Islam, democracy, and modernity go hand in hand. It is true that democracy is still in the process of consolidation, and inevitably there are glitches in its working. But by any measures, it has been taking roots quite rapidly. Australia is the home of the largest number of world-renowned scholars on Indonesia, which also help to attract Indonesian students to study in Australia. Efforts to improve understanding, such as through the BRIDGE program, building relationships through intercultural dialogue and growing engagement, are commendable and need to be supported. Yet, the number of Australians studying in Indonesia and learn more about Indonesian language and culture has remained very small, only around 100 a year, and mostly for short periods. Frequent travel advisories have also hampered Australians coming to Indonesia to study or do research. I have also heard that a number of schools and universities in Australia are closing down their Indonesian language programs. If this is true, it is quite regrettable. It is my view that only by developing closer people-to-people interactions at all levels, with genuine efforts to understand each other, can we develop the necessary ballast in our bilateral relations to ensure a deeper and more sustainable long-term relations. Ladies and gentlemen, with these thoughts in mind, I consider the honor bestowed upon me today to be also a tribute to the unfailing spirit of our peoples to build a durable bridge of goodwill between our two nations. The works have started in earnest from both ends, and the work should continue. Chancellor, Vice Chancellor, members of the Senate, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I accept the honorary degree with pride and appreciation. Thank you.